Good morning. Welcome to Cattlemen's Day 2019. I'm Evan Titkemeyer. I'm Interim Department Head for Animal Sciences and Industry. I'm pleased to see a good crowd here despite the poor weather. It's been a tough winter, but I hope you all think about the good grass that we should have this summer and spring with all the moisture that we've had. First thing I want to do this morning is thank Dr. Dale Blasi and Dr. Jim Drulard, who are co-chairs for the Cattlemen's Day. They put together a good program today. I hope you'll learn a lot. If you have a chance to give them a thanks, I'm sure they'd appreciate that. And if you have suggestions for way we can improve future years, I'm sure they'd be happy to hear that as well. As interim head, I feel really good about our department right now. Our undergraduate teaching program has reached its highest numbers ever this year. We have faculty working to solve lots of problems out in the livestock and beef industries. And we cover all areas from cow-calf, receiving cattle, feedlot cattle, meat sides of things. We're working in areas like nutrition, genetics, management, reproduction, meat science, and so we really do have everything covered from farm to fork. Our goal is really to have a strong scientific understanding of the beef industry. That's what kind of we're about. And we can say we're pretty good at that if we look at the publications in some key journals like the Journal of Animal Science. K-State has more publications there than any other university. So we feel like we're meeting our mission there. But we really don't want to stop with just the science. We want to make sure it gets out to the industry and so that you folks can use all that information to hopefully be more efficient on your own operations. Yeah, we do that through events like Cattlemen's Day, but don't think that Cattlemen's Day is the only event that's involved as part of our extension program. Clearly, we have lots of other sessions around the state. You can find lots of publications online, and we have lots of extension personnel who hopefully are available to answer your questions, whether that be over the phone, through email, or even in person. I'm personally looking forward to the speakers we have this morning as they address the issue of competition in the meat industry, and that competition through non-meat protein sources. Like any other industry, we need to be aware of the alternatives that are available to consumers, and information on this topic clearly will guide the meat industry toward appropriate responses. I'm also looking forward to our afternoon sessions. We've got a lot of good speakers providing some information on the latest science that's out there. And I'm sure there'll be somebody else that makes this announcement later, but I want to be sure to tell you that the activities out at the stocker unit are not going to be out there this afternoon because of the weather conditions that make that impossible. But those activities will be out at the sheep unit this afternoon. At the end of the day, I'm also looking forward to seeing a few of you perhaps out at the Legacy Sale. It's our 42nd annual sale. And you'll be able to see the efforts that our students have put in over the semester, and hopefully everybody will want to take home a bull or two at the end of the day. We also are going to have 5 horses for sale out this afternoon at the event, and the preview for those horses has changed. Preview for the horses will be at 2 o'clock at the Equine Performance Teaching Center at the vet school. That's just on the east side of the vet school. And if you have any questions about the horses, don't hesitate to call Sterling. And I've been told that her phone number is on all of the advertising that's associated with those horses being for sale. So hopefully you'll be able to contact her if you want to get a hold of her. My real key message for the morning, though, is the same thing I tell my kids every day when I send them off to school. Have a great day and learn a lot. So the first person that's going to teach them something is going to be our morning speaker, Dr. Brad Morgan. He is the Senior Director of Protein. I always thought that's an interesting title. Senior Director of Protein at the Performance Food Group. Dr. Morgan's a graduate of Oklahoma State University, the University of Nebraska, and Texas A&M. Don't hold that against him. He served as a faculty member at Colorado State for 4 or 5 years. Was a faculty member at Oklahoma State for about 15 years before working for Pfizer for about 4 years. That's all prior to his time at Performance Food Groups, where I believe he's been there 4 or 5 years now. Today, Dr. Morgan will be discussing the potential for plant-sourced, and I'm going to call them meat-like products, and laboratory-produced meat-like products, and their potential to take market share away from the meat industry. So with that, thanks for coming, Dr. Morgan.
Thank you. Appreciate the chance to be here. The last time I was in Manhattan, Kansas, stayed with my buddy John Butler, brought my 2 little dogs up here, babysitted them, watched a horrible football game until I watched the horrible basketball game just recently. Ken Odie, my good friend, just reminded me that in the basketball games and the football game, K-State has beat us 274 to like 112. So, I don't know. But anyway, I got so aggravated. John can vouch for this. I went to his house, supposed to spend the night again with him that night. I packed up the dogs. I packed up my clothes. I went ahead and drove to Stillwater right then. And ran out of gas about 23 miles out of town. I didn't even tell you that. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. It's Stillwater, Oklahoma, where I reside, Manhattan, Kansas, a lot of things in common. Both good land-grant universities. I'm happy to be here. I got to teach class yesterday for Dr. Cora, and I appreciated that opportunity. And again, hopefully you'll learn something. I know I've learned something trying to prepare for this because my good friend Ken Odie says, hey, would you come up and talk at Cattlemen's Day? And he convinced me to do it, and then 2 days later he sent me my title that I was supposed to talk about. So I've had to kind of ramp up on some of this, so hopefully you'll learn something from this. I think one thing I want to share with you today is probably one of the most popular of these type of new alternative protein-like items out there is something called the Impossible Burger. Now, Dr. Corey, did you say that your students in your advanced class had eaten that burger? Beyond Meat. Okay. So again, they've actually experienced it. Again, what is the Impossible Burger made out of? This is a plant-based type item. It's made out of textured wheat protein, coconut oil, protein, potato protein, and thing that they want to simulate that bloody serum flavor, they're extracting the heme molecule from plants. So again, that's what one of the items we're going to talk about today. Does it fit? Does it have its place? And should we be nervous about this from a beef cattle standpoint, the beef industry standpoint? I do have a video, I thought, and I'll tell you real quickly, this video is about 2 minutes. There's 3 or 4 people that are trying this Impossible Burger. This was in the New York Times, so that might be a little bit of a slant towards the end, but you can understand why we need to probably talk about this topic today. So enjoy this.
It looks like a burger, so let's see how it tastes.
This is the Impossible Burger. It was engineered by food scientists in Silicon Valley. Their goal? To match the taste, texture, and bloody look of a hamburger. So even the most committed carnivores will consider going veg.
In general, I don't like things trying to be things that they're not. If you're not going to drink beer, why would you drink non-alcoholic beer? What's the point?
I don't seek this kind of food out. I mean, I was a little reluctant to do this.
The burger is actually vegan. The key ingredient is heme, the iron-rich molecule found in blood. Heme is that special something that makes a burger taste like a burger. Impossible Foods figured out how to extract heme from plants instead of animals, and produce it using fermentation.
Thank you.
So, does it make it taste like a real hamburger?
It's very good, but it doesn't, I wouldn't think it was an actual meat hamburger.
But I think it's really good as a plant-based option. I'm actually surprised. I'm kind of a skeptical bastard.
I can tell this is not meat.
It has a very meaty flavor, like a sort of a deep beef flavor. I don't think I've ever tasted that in a non-meat product.
Like a lot of other startups, Impossible Foods wants to change the world. Cows use a ton of resources, while emitting greenhouse gases, which are terrible for the environment.
To me, the environmental and ethical arguments are stronger than the health arguments, even though I am a cardiologist.
It doesn't taste threatening. It's making me a little conscious about the plants now, though. It's like, oh my God, they bleed. It's freaking me out.
It seems like it could replace meat in the long run. And not this version, but I think about it in the way that I think about, like, electric cars.
Like, I'm always going to have a job. You know, there's been butchers since time immemorial.
I would order it when I was going out to eat. Although I probably, if I wanted a hamburger, I probably would still order a hamburger.
Okay. I think one of the things that struck
I want
me...
to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to do.
It's Nick Nicholson, if any of you know Nick. He's got a hell of a deal with the... He rates cheeseburgers in Dallas-Fort Worth area, and they put it online, so it's a good gig if you can get it. I think one thing that kind of struck me from that video was this. Who actually preferred the hamburger, the real hamburger, was the cardiologist. The butcher said, well, I guess if you had to have a plant alternative burger, this is pretty good, surprises me. The vegan said it didn't taste like meat, which is surprising, but now she's threatened by plants because she didn't know plants bleed because they extract iron. And then the techie guy was actually, I think, just happy to have a free meal. So the reason I wanted to actually include this in today is that I think that's sort of where we're at on this topic. We're all over the place. There's nothing that's cut and dry yet. I do want to share, though, that's a plant-based, and obviously we have the protein-based, lab-based, and they originally wanted to call it clean meat, and that's been changed now. They have to call it lab meat, lab-cultured meat. And I think that's absolutely, it shouldn't be called clean meat because it gives everyone else the perception that real beef is dirty. So again, we're going to talk about this. I'm not going to turn this into a science fair, so you can relax. We're going to keep it to where I can understand it. And if there are any technical questions, Dr. Oldie has agreed to answer those questions because he does teach this in some of his classes. Exactly what is a plant-based meat item? Well, you've already seen an example of one of those today. But again, this will make it a little more appetizing. It's a structured plant, fungus-derived food, or they're designed to replace animal-based meats. Virtually what they're doing is they're trying to take, just like the Impossible Burger, proteins from a plant source, add some blood type, something that resembles that, take some certain types of fats, put it in there for flavor standpoints, put these on some type of structured scale to give it something that resembles a real meat item. So again, we'll talk more about that. Again, here's an example. They're taking some of the heme, they're taking some of the fat, they're incorporating some of the encapsulated fat, and they're trying to make this into a structured type meat appearing item. So again, it's only been going on since 1920-something, in which we used to have soy isolates and soy proteins incorporated into a ground beef patty. Those were not very good. They didn't taste very good. They were very low cost. What we're doing today, though, is trying to step it up and still have a long ways to go, and we'll talk about that. Here's some examples of some of those products out there. We saw the Impossible Burger. Again, here's the Beyond Meat that Dr. Cora's class had in his advanced class. Here's a chorizo sausage product. Here's an Italian sausage product. Here's another type of sausage product here. These are all plant-based items. Here's some more as well. And it's not just meat per se. You have other types of items that are hitting the market today as well. Here's a smart bacon that looks like dog chew. Here's a pizza pocket. Here's some other types of things. So again, there's lots of different items out there today. They're available at retail. They're available at food service. Performance Food Group, we're 100% food service restaurants with one exception. That's the Manhattan Meat Market here in town. So you can get our products there as well. That's the last commercial I'll put out there. Yesterday or day before yesterday, had this come up, Motif Ingredients. They're out of Boston. They make yogurts and a lot of dairy-based products. They've decided that they're going to go ahead and get into, because of the success of what they call the success of Impossible Burger, they raised $90 million. They're going to use biotechnology and their expertise in the fermentation area And they're going to try to come up with things that are ice cream, plant-based yogurts, plant-based milk, plant-based, again, these types of things. Do we need to be defensive about some of these things? I think we need to be aggressive in some, and we need to stand up on our own because of the soy milk, the nut milk. You've all seen that. It actually has a pretty good section of the milk industry right now. You've seen the videos where they're making fun of, well, I never have seen teats on an almond, those types of things. We do need to make sure that we define what is meat, because if we don't, we will have some of the similar things that they've gone through. The other thing, too, is this. You have a common investors. You can see here Louis Dreyfus, Bill Gates, the Amazon owner, and also Richard Branson from Virgin. They have invested into this $90 million into this particular company. I mentioned to you, it's not just meat. Here's some of the items that they're considering making. You can see here all the way from scrambled egg, pancake batter, cake mixes, cookies, cookie dough, mayonnaise. Anything that they feel like they can use the fermentation, the emulsification, those types of things. And also animal-free milk are on their radar screen. So again, I just throw it out there for FYI. You've probably heard of some of these cell-based, not plant-based, but cell-based companies as well. They've done rather well. You'll read in the newspaper and you'll see something that'll say, well, we've increased sales by 80% over last year. That's a little misleading, because if you only sold 12 boxes of something last year, it's pretty easy to show an 80% increase. And we're all guilty with that. But again, these companies are pretty legitimate, and they are financially sound at this point. And I'm going to be honest with you and try to be as unbiased as possible. But again, this particular group here, Memphis Meats, has been around for 4 or 5 years. They've done pretty well in the industry. This one right here, the Good Food Institute, GFI, I'll show you some of the things from their webpage today. Most of these companies, what they're trying to do is they're trying to scare you, threaten you, talking about things like animal behavior, animal welfare, the land and utilization of the land, antibiotic resistance, all of those things that we don't have. We're talking about the plants and the meat alternatives, and they're comparing that to our industry. So I think we'll share some of those with you today. Here's just a timeline. Again, 2013, the world's first. You'll notice at that time they called it a clean burger, which no longer can be called that. Again, 2016, Memphis Meats made the first clean meatball. 2017, they made the first clean fish. And 2017, the world's first chicken and duck type items. So again, they've been around, they're relatively new, but that's some of the items that have come from this. What is and I say clean meat. And the only reason I do this is from their webpage, and they haven't changed their webpage. This is the GFI. Clean meat is a genuine animal meat that can replicate the sensory and nutritional profiles of meat because it's comprised of same cell types, and they're arranged in a three-dimensional structure as an animal muscle tissue. An example of that, and I know this is very busy, but I just want to highlight a few things. New Harvest, that company, they use cultured meat, refers to meat which comes from cells, fats, and connective tissue and blood. So they're taking those items and extracting cells from them, trying to replicate those cells and arrange them in a certain three-dimensional layer. That's what they're doing. Good Food Institute, they call it clean meat. That's what they originally called it, and they are trying to grow meat outside of an animal from a small cell sample, eliminating the need for factory farming and slaughter. Memphis Meats, sourcing high-quality cells from animals and cultivating them into meat. That's kind of why I'm more of a fan of Memphis Meat, because you can see their language is a little more consumer-friendly and not as threatening as the Good Food Institute. They have one called Just Meat and Seafood. Is made of cells instead of live animals and confined animals. Again, I can go through all of these if you want, but the point is that they're all trying to extract cells, and they're trying to arrange them after growing them in some type of growth media. So again, grow the cells, put them on the scaffolding to layer them, give them some shape, give them a growth medium, The bioreactor, this is really the hurdle right now, is a lot of these things work real well in the lab, but if you ever had to scale them up on a commercial standpoint, they've got a long ways to go for step number 4 at this point in order to make this burger in this particular case. I will say progress is being made a little bit from a mouthfeel standpoint. Originally, whenever these products came out, if you bit into one of these burgers, I laughed a little bit, Dr. Cora, yesterday, your students, they said it wasn't very good. They should have tasted it 4 years ago. It was not very good at all. So they have made some progress in that the burger actually looks like a burger, and it cooks pretty good like a burger if you cook it on a flat-top grill. You cannot cook it on something with an open flame. We'll talk more about that. And these chicken strips, they do at least look like strips now and not that cardboard that we showed you earlier in the bacon. So they are making progress, again, from a lab standpoint, not from a commercialization standpoint. This is where they want to go. They want to have a bioreactor to be able to grow these cells that they've extracted. And again, they're a long ways from this, and that right now is the hurdle that all of them are facing. What is all the hype about? Well, you read something about it. We read something this morning. Tyson's VP of Sustainability is now going to take over their alternative meat area, which is probably, in my opinion, where it needs to be in that sustainability area. That's fine. Again, but what's the hype about? Well, the hype about this is people like Bill Gates getting involved. That makes the news. He has put a lot of money. He says we've only explored about 8% of the world's plant proteins as potential meat alternatives. Remaking meat is one sector of the food industry that is ripe for innovation and growth. And that's why I'm putting my money behind it. Why else is it a hype? Well, all of a sudden, our friends at Cargill and Tyson have invested in this. And I went ahead and just called some of my friends at Cargill and Tyson and asked them, why did you do that? I'm just curious. I said, I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you all. And they say, well, honestly, because we want to invest in this because we want to know what's going on and we want a seat at the table. We want to know exactly what is going on in this space. Obviously, they're not relying on this to be one of their huge profit centers. But they do want to know what's going on and not read about it. And I think that's smart business to do that. And you can see that Cargill has invested and Tyson have invested in Memphis Meats, which is the one I feel like is probably we should align with if we're going to align with that from a beef industry standpoint. What else is all the hype? Well, this is some of the welfare issues you can see here. This is from the Good Food Institute. And they talk about animal welfare. The current production of animal products subjects tens of billions of thinking, feeling animals to lives of extreme confinement, emotional trauma, inhumane slaughter. That's the scare tactic that some of these groups are trying to go after. One of the things that I do in my job, and John Butler partners with us and raises a lot of cattle for us, and we take a lot of people to feed yards. We take a lot of people to packing plants. And when I say people, I'm talking about people that may live in New York City, that live in New Jersey, that might live in Little Rock, Arkansas. They've never been to a farm because they moved there, and they're the ones that are actually buying products. I always enjoy taking these people out to Great Bend, Kansas for a couple of reasons. Number one, we get them here. We go to Harry's Steakhouse here in Manhattan, eat a good meal, get up the next morning, drive out to Great Bend. John's always been a great host, does a good job on the tours for us. But one of the reasons I like it, you got them in the car for 3 or 4 hours that day with very little cell service. And you've got a captive audience. The other thing that happens is you go to ward feeders. They go there, they get back into the car, and driving in, they're all skeptical because they see 40,000 cattle. And they're all like, they look like chickens looking out the window. And then they get out, and they've got on their new boots because we tell them you need to wear some boots or something because it might be a little muddy, especially this time of year. And you ought to see some of the things they wear. But the point is they get back in the car, and we're starting to drive over to Garden City, to the packing plant. And there's always this conversation. You know what? That was surprising. Why's that? I just didn't realize that you could have 40,000 cattle in one location and really just give a damn. Those people give a damn, don't they? Mm-hmm. And then they go, okay, So all of a sudden, you've erased some of this factory farming out of their mind. You really have a captive audience driving to Garden City because there's zero self-service there. And that by this time, they feel not as threatened by you. Most of these people that we're taking, they read this kind of stuff, and they just take it as gospel. That's why I told those students yesterday, do not ever be ashamed of being from a farm, a rural area, or having an animal science, food science degree from Kansas State University, because you are going to be more and more important in the future for our industry. You've got to tell our story. We cannot just take it for granted. We get them to the packing plant, though, and they get in the car, and it's the same thing. They're expecting it to be a rodeo at a packing plant. And they get in the car, and they said, that was not near as bad as I thought it was going to be. So again, we do that 5 or 6 times a year. We also do that for our salespeople because we have a lot of salespeople that have never been out of New York City. They have never been out of wherever. And it's important for them to have confidence in what we're doing where they can go out and sell our products for a living. Here's another claim that the alternative meats are using. They feel like, you know what? According to this, by producing meat from cell levels up, we can ensure the highest level of quality at every stage. In other words, we're starting to get on antibiotic resistance. We're not going to ever have to get these cells are not going to get sick. So we can actually grow something that we know has not been treated with one of those nasty antibiotics. Again, that's one of the things that Progressive Beef, the things that John and his people do for us, it's part of our production system. They understand real quickly that you can do that in a normal confinement operation and have 100% confidence in it. Again, this is off of Memphis Meats. That's the project they did. And I know that my K-State friends are here, faculty members, and you can do this in your lab. You can show it very easily, but what they've done here is show conventional pork, conventional beef, organic pork, and oh, by the way, here's the cultured pork and cultured beef, and we don't have any antibiotics or bacteria in the areas where we've actually grown our product. And that's not a real good comparison. And Lord knows we don't even know how they came to this, to be honest with you. So the point is that we have to tell our story, and we have to do things right, and we have to do it right 365 days a year. But that's one of the areas. Here's probably another area that they're really trying to stand on. They're trying to say here that, you know what, these people that are in production agriculture, they're just killing the planet because of greenhouse gases, because of all this carbon footprint. We can actually produce our product with less waste and reduce these greenhouse gases. And of course, they show the ice caps melting, and that's because of the feed yard in the center of Kansas that's occurring. So again, we need to make sure and tell our story. I put this pin of, these are some Braveheart cattle at one of Beef Marketing Group's yards. And I just show that, beautiful cattle, number one. Number two, they've got the Impossible Burger versus the traditional beef burger, for instance, from a Braveheart animal. Their burger has 21 grams of protein, ours has 19. They use 1/20, 1/4, and 1/8 the amount of land, water, and greenhouse gases that are produced. That's part of that marketing of those particular alternative proteins that are out there. Again, is that true? Yeah, that's probably true if you want to look at it that way. It's true. But here's the thing I want to make sure. This is where it really kind of sticks in my craw a little bit. They talk about the Earth's surface and how much land we have and how much of it you can live on and how much of it is agriculture and how much of it is taken up by livestock and how much meat and dairy versus plant could provide from a protein standpoint. And this is actually off of the Plant-Based Meat 101. This is off their website in which you can take modules of classes. And they've got 10 different classes. And this is the first section. But the point is this. This is why I get a little aggravated. This is one of the things that came off here, and I had to laugh when I saw this a little bit. That area there, that's cow pasture and range here. Down here, that right there is golf. Okay. This right here, I guess, since the New Orleans is there in the Gulf, that's feed export land. So my point is this, and this comes from their webpage on this. It says, we could increase the amount of land for food we eat if we reduce the land dedicated to livestock. Good Food Institute. Okay? Here's my problem is I've heard all of this stuff about, boy, when we get to the year 2050, we're going to have X billion number of people on this planet. We're not going to have enough protein. We're not going to have enough food. And that's just not true. Our folks at Elanco and those folks, Jeff Armstrong, I appreciate that story. But here's the problem with that, in my opinion. We already produce enough food for 9 billion people in the world. What we need to quit doing, in my opinion, is quit throwing away so much of it. In the United States alone, we throw away, believe it or not, 1,400 calories per person per day. We just waste it. We rake it off our plates. I thought about doing this last night at the banquet, and I just didn't do it. But we've actually done this before at the American Meat Science Association's banquet. We actually measured everything on all the plates. We knew exactly what everything weighed, and we weighed everything beforehand, and then we weighed everything that was brought back to the kitchen afterwards. And in that particular night, and these are meat eaters, and most of them are eaters. We threw away that night about 900 calories per person per night. Of course, we had about 3,000 calories per plate to begin with. Too much. That's why I'm rounder than I normally was. Okay? But look at this, for instance. Is that me? No. 3,000 pounds of food are wasted every second in the United States. That's enough to feed 650 Americans daily. Heck, guys, we're only supposed to eat 2,000 calories a day, and we're throwing away 1,400 calories a day. What's the problem with this? Well, and I know we're being recorded, part of the issue is that probably our food supply is too cheap. We're spoiled rotten when it comes to food. We go to Walmart, Supercenter, we expect it to be there every time and be priced competitively. We spend 7% of our disposable income on food. If you go to the European countries, they'll spend anywhere from 15 to 32% of their income on food. Asian countries, Japan, they spend about 16 to 17% of their income on food. Why? Because they don't have that big block of land in the middle. They have people all over the place. Any of you been to Japan before? Makes you appreciate the United States. I guarantee you. Go to Japan, you take the state of Montana, put half the population of the United States in Montana, surround Montana with water, and that's Japan. Okay? There's not room to grow food over there. That's why they're normally a nice export customer. This is the biggest hurdle right now, in my opinion, is regulatory. These alternative plant and cell culture type meat items, they want to be called meat, but they don't want to be inspected and go through the same rigorous things that we have to go through in order to get it inspected and prove that it is safe to eat. The example of that is that they want to be able to, you can see here under FDA, it says here they're responsible for food except not for meat. That would be the USDA, and they are the ones that are associated with meat. So you got FDA over here, everything except meat. That's where the alternative proteins want to be able to go to. They don't want to go under USDA, FSIS, because they know it's pretty rigorous. And if you don't look for it, you're not going to find it, whether I'm talking about E. coli or antibiotic resistance or whatever. And that's the area they want to go in. I know this is a busy slide. This is FDA. We've got about 200 different domestic and foreign food facilities. They only go to once every 5 years, once every 10 years, go to 6,000 or so of these 200,000, which they call high risk. They only go there to visit. That's 6,000 inspections that they go through out of 200,000 facilities. What do we have? Well, I was in Garden City, Kansas, at the Tyson plant there. We have 6,300 facilities across the country. In those facilities, we have 8,700 inspectors. And heck, on the slaughter floor alone out there, they had 13 inspectors. Realize these FDA people in a seafood operation, for instance, they don't even have to be there. They come there if you're high risk once every 5 to 10 years. So that's why they don't want to go under that FSIS USDA facility. Our program in red meat is inspected 100% of the time daily. Big difference. And that's some of the concerns that we have about food safety, about shelf life, about certain things. So one of the things that came up in this, and I think this is good, is that it says here, cell-based meat firm, that would be Memphis Meats, and also the North American Meat Institute, they want to work together. And they actually wrote a letter to President Trump in August saying we want to work together. We want to work with FDA on the regulatory side, and we want to work with USDA on the inspection side. And of course, we hadn't heard anything yet on this. But there is going to be a meeting in the end of March on this particular topic. And you can imagine some of these companies are squirming because, again, Memphis wants to do it. But I think this is something that's going to have to be done. Just wrapping things up, some of the key issues that we have. Well, first off, is it meat? The American Meat Science Association, they tried doing this. You get a bunch of meat scientists in a room and say, can you please come up with a definition of meat? And it was a cluster. However, they have come up with a definition of meat, and I think it will stand. The other thing, too, is what do we call it? We've already know we can't call it clean meat anymore. A lot of people don't know what we need to do at this point. But again, we have to have a seat at the table. And that's why the Cargills and Tysons are at the table. Because I think they're going to actually carry some good water, some weight, on helping us define exactly what is the definition of meat. I think that's very important in the future. It has to be called cell-based meat now. No more clean meat. And they need to change their web pages. What do consumers want? Again, you saw the video. I think the research findings show that as well. Real briefly, 2018 was a couple of projects. They investigated this. Overall positive view, 65% were willing to try the cultured meats, the plant and cell-based meats, of which about a third of them said they would be willing to eat it regular. And that's fine, as long as you're willing to pay for it. And we'll talk about that also. Another project says here, 5 to 11% of the respondents said they would eat the product. This group here, 11% chose cultured meat over conventional. So again, about 10%, 1 out of every 10. Is that worth having these types of things on your menu? We'll answer that here in a second as well. I just want you to look at this. The household earnings of at least $75,000 are twice as likely to buy it. Today, that number has increased to at least $100,000 household income would be willing to try this. So it's a real small portion of the population that this might actually, and the one thing, of course, that it says that I had to laugh a little bit is that the college students said, yeah, I'll try it. 44% of it. Of course, we know they're not going to be paying for it. Somebody else is going to be paying for it. So again, I was a little surprised at this. It says 43% of the men said they would probably try it compared to 24% of the women. And you kind of saw that in the video. Even the butcher said, it's an alternative. It's not bad for a plant-based meat. So again, who knows? I think this is what's going to work still. And this is what we do for a living. And this is the people at BMG and John Butler. And we sell a lot of beef. Performance Food Group, we sell to a lot of customers. We sell to convenience stores, to Harry's Steakhouse. We have a lot of customers that want a lot of things. One of the things you have to do, and people ask me, do you miss teaching class at a university? And I really don't. And it has nothing to do with kids. It's because I still get to teach quite a bit today. We have 2,300 salespeople across the country. They are responsible. We're a broad line distributor, which means when you go to a Harry's Steakhouse, they'll buy beef from us. They'll buy napkins, forks, glassware, cleaning supplies. And that's good because we lead with protein, with meat. And if we get the meat business, guess what? You get all the other stuff also. That's why it's important to have a strong program. One of the things that we've tried to do is this. We don't just show up with a list of specifications to a packing plant and say, here's what we want, put it in our box. We want to start all the way to the cow-calf to the feed yard if possible. That's what we've tried to do here. In this case, Beef Marketing Group, going to Tyson. We raise everything under the Progressive Beef platform. You have third-party audits. We have everybody being trained. It works real well for us. We take a DNA sample of each animal that goes into our program with Identigen. That way we can trace it back if there is an issue. And guess what? You can use that DNA sample to go to the BMG and say, you know what? We want more of these cattle based off of this. And they are very good about that. We call this path proven. And that's what we sell. We try to sell a story. And that's this. I ask each one of our salespeople, put this in your folder. And what we do is we talk about BMG, black cattle, progressive beef. We talk about path proven. We talk about a DNA sample and Angus verified. We talk about carcasses that weigh 850 pounds or less. Our customers want smaller ribeyes and smaller strips. That way they can cut a 14-ounce ribeye and it be 1.25 inches. They can cook it, and also it has plate presence. They don't want a 22-incher. That's 1/4 inch thick. The other thing that we do is we ask Tyson or Cargill to slow down the line speed. We want it trimmed a certain way. We want it in our bag, our box, and we want the correct label put on the box if possible. We want it graded. We offer it in prime, premium choice, and regular choice. We don't offer select anymore. Really and truly, it's not worth it. You guys are doing too good a job, and there's lots of marbling out there right now. Lots of it. We also age it for at least 21 days before we deliver it to our customer to ensure tenderness. So everything I've talked about here is our story. We are selling a story. And that's why it's important for our salespeople to understand the story. Most salespeople are intimidated by beef. It's a lot easier to sell chicken breast. And beef standpoint, they're scared they're going to get a question. And that's my job. One of the things I try to do is try to make them feel more comfortable. I can't tell you how many times that I get a phone call and say, Doc, I want to be at so-and-so tomorrow. Are you going to be available at this time? And because they may pick up the phone and call me, put it on speakerphone, and just visit with the customer. Talk about the story. And this is exclusively our story. Again, this is a relatively new thing as far as this sale-based. You know, it's 4 or 5 years. I mentioned to you that we've had some things happen recently. It's relatively new. They're putting a lot of money behind it. States are getting involved. This is Nebraska. They're trying to define exactly what is meat, and if you're going to put something like this in one of our supermarkets, people need to understand that it is not from an animal. It's from a plant or from a lab. This is the young woman, the senator that's doing it. I had to put this in here when I was looking up her picture. I got a master's degree at the University of Nebraska in 86 to 88. This guy was in the Senate in Nebraska when I was there. His name is Ernie Chambers. He always wears a sweatshirt every day. He lives in Omaha. He's elected 90% vote every year. And he has one thing he always tries to pass every year is that we need to start paying these football players at the University of Nebraska. This is one thing. and Ken Odie, when I mentioned that to him, he says, in other words, need to make it formally. In other words, not under the table. Moving forward, challenges. Not going to bore you. I've already said some of this. The livestock industry, our perception. We've got to tell people what we do. The other thing, too, that we have to do is we do need to continue to work on sustainability and the environment. I mean, John Butler, he's one of the leaders in this. And Brandon, they get it. And they understand having ethanol and farming and using the manure on the fields. And we need to talk about that. I use that one slide all the time. And it's a picture of one of you all's feed yards, and behind it is a cornfield. Over there in the other corner is an ethanol plant. And you start talking about not having to use fertilizers because we're cleaning the bunks and the pens, moving it over there. And all of a sudden you'll see the light bulb come on. And it works. Visuals work. We've got to make sure, though, that we're consistent in our stories and also in our products. And we take a lot of pride in our Braveheart. Again, not only is it 850, but all the carcasses have to have an 11 to 14.9 ribeye also. We want it to be consistent. What about the plant and cell-based meat? Well, they've got to come up with some science. They'll come up with some science when USDA gets involved, in my opinion. Wouldn't you agree, Randy? The other thing, too, is consumers have to accept it. You saw the cardiologist. She said, that's okay. But if I was going to eat a hamburger in a restaurant, I'd just order a hamburger. You know, Got a long ways to go. Realize, too, that was a hamburger that had bun and lettuce and pickle and onion and all that other stuff, not just eating a patty. The other thing, too, is this consumer acceptance. 1 out of every 10 consumers, I don't like those odds if I'm investing $90 million in something. So we'll see. Regulatory, we've already talked about USDA versus FDA. I hope it's a paired program. And also, they've got to start addressing food safety. And Randy, I think that's an area that we need to work on probably pretty quickly, is looking at some of these and actually running them through the gamut to see if they are actually safe or not. I went ahead, how many of you shop on Amazon? Some of you? I went ahead and looked up, and this is the product that Dr. Cora had in his class. He had the Beyond Meat items. This was on Amazon a couple of days ago. You can see here, there's 2 5-pound bags, 10 pounds of product. That's a beef crumble, and that right there are chicken strips. The cost of those was $15.20 or $15.45 per pound. It's the cost for ground beef crumbles. And you can see, I was going to have it delivered to Melissa Morgan in Stillwater, Oklahoma, but I did not hit order. I don't know if I had $152 on my credit card or not. Point is that that's the problem right now. My youngest son, Branson, manages a restaurant in Oklahoma City. I called his boss, the corporate chef, a place called Charleston's, a really good restaurant chain. They've got them in Oklahoma City, Wichita, Fort Worth, whatever area. They offer Impossible Burger on their menu. That burger costs $14. A regular cheeseburger costs $13. And I asked Brad, Brad Johnson, I said, what do you think of this Beyond Burger? I'm just curious. Got to do a talk on it. Yeah, it's a good product. It's good. I said, well, have you ever had one? He said, I had it once. Okay, how was it? How many do you sell? We sell about 12 to 15 a day at each restaurant. Really, it surprised me. This is a steakhouse, high-end salads, burgers, that type of stuff. I said, how many cheeseburgers do you sell a day at your He said, we sell between 70 and 80 burgers at our restaurants every day. I said, it's only $1 difference. I said, are you losing money on that Impossible Burger? And he's real quick to remind me, we don't lose money on anything. He said, now, I'll just tell you, we don't make very much money off of it. I said, how is it? He says, it's pretty good. And it was funnier. The longer we talked, the less confidence you could hear in his voice. He said, it's real hard to cook. He says that we use that open-type grill. It's got wood underneath it. And he says, if you're not there and if you overcook it, it sticks to the grill. He says, you better have taco salad on your menu also because it's going to fall apart. I said, well, why do you keep it on there? He says, because we sell 12 of them a day, roughly, and it keeps that group of people happy. We want to offer it. It's no different than the McLean Deluxe at McDonald's. Do you know they still offer that? If somebody walks in and orders it, it's cooked to order. And they sell 1 per outlet per day. Okay? So, again. I throw this up here. This is the group that we're working with recently. Fort Scott, Kansas, called E3 Beef. It's a never-ever grain-fed program. I throw this up here for one reason. My last slide. Number one, that is a beautiful ribeye. Everything we've talked about today on these alternative meats has been a crumble, a burger, a sausage, a strip of some kind. There are a heck of a long ways to getting that perfected. In my opinion, they'll never be able to recreate this. From a mouthfeel, a flavor, it's just not going to happen unless I'm completely fooled on this. They've got a long ways to go. They're struggling with the ground beef patty. The ribeye steak, this is something that I feel like will never, ever, ever, unless they have a lot of breakthrough in their technology. That's my opinion. So again, that's all I have. Got a question or two? Thank you. All right.
I think we have time for a few questions from the audience. If anyone has a desire to stump Dr. Morgan here.
I told if Ken Odie raised his hand, I'm going to be like Trump. I'm just going to... Yes, sir.
My question is, we had a speaker in class last fall, and she was heads a venture capital company that's invested in several of these. and she made the case from their viewpoint, one of their biggest challenges, and she was talking about several of the products, but it's actually moving their product from the health food section in the retail outlet to the meat section. She said they won't be successful till they get their products in the meat counter. So do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, and I'll tell you one of the reasons they're in that area, Dr. Odie, is that a majority of these products are being sold frozen. And obviously we don't sell a lot of frozen product at retail. So why do they sell it, Dr. Phoebus, why do they sell it frozen? Shelf life. Very short. They have to sell it frozen at this point. And until they get over that and able to put it into the meat case, it's going to have to be sold under refrigerated conditions. That's another one of those scientific hurdles, in my opinion, that they've got to get through. We also have meat items, real meat, that has to be sold frozen. I'm not going to bring any of them up, but the reason why is they sell very few packages of them a day. They sell them frozen. And they do that because they cannot get the 3 to 4 days shelf life and then have 3 to 4 days shelf life in your home. So until they get that, it will never be moved, in my opinion, to the retail area. Good question. Yes, sir.
Ultimately, you're going to have the responsibility of determining the definition of meat. You know, I know we have these uniform definitions of what is ice cream and things like that. Who's going to be responsible for defining that? And then, who do we need to pressure and how do we need to pressure in order to get meat defined as from a slaughter?
Exactly. Good. Everybody heard the question? I'll tell you what, it just so happened when I was president of the American Meat Science Association, that's when we started going through those exercises of what is the definition of meat. We came up with, I thought, a very good definition of meat. And it talks about exactly like you just talked about. The key thing is talking about harvested from a live animal. We can't talk about DNA, any of that, because it would be covered under, it's harvested from a live animal. I think there's ultimately, there's a good definition already out there. It's going to have to be somebody at USDA that comes up with this definition of meat. We've learned our lesson about almond milk. We cannot sit around and just hope that this comes through. And we are consistently pushing this forward. The American Meat Science Association is, for instance. And so it's ultimately going to be the USDA that would come up with that particular ruling. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, but the AMSA does have a definition.
Very much.
It's been published.
Very much. And I think it's pretty good.
I think USDA is pretty acceptable.
Yep. I agree. I think USDA has taken that and they've accepted that. They actually liked having the meat scientists involved with that definition. So that's where it's at, but we're constantly putting pressure on. We need to get that printed. Good question. So yes, sir.
On the cell-based side, you talked about restrictions for mass producing. Are there any roadblocks or restrictions on the plant-based side?
No, the question about still there are some restrictions. The plant-based side, there's not during if we did it like the old days where we actually took a meat product and just dumped some type of protein in it, vegetable protein, soy protein in it. They're not doing that, obviously. What they're wanting to do is they're wanting to get protein, a connective tissue, a fat, and they're wanting to actually have those cells put together. They're wanting to structure them in a certain way. So that's the big thing, is trying to recreate the texture, the appearance, and the mouthfeel. They've made progress, but they're a long ways. Now, one thing that they have done is extracting the heme protein from plants and incorporating it in there and giving it that bloody serum taste. That was good technology. Obviously, it's not the same as the heme protein that has iron in it from a piece of beefsteak. So again, I still think there are a long ways to go. Would you think so, sir? Long ways. Yes, sir.
So big difference in proteins and amino acids. And you can say you've got protein and you don't. The proteins aren't straight combo.
Right. Okay, the question is there a difference in the amino acid composition between some of the cell-based meat and the proteins coming from animals? And again, what they're doing is they're trying to take selective cells. So they're taking cells that they're wanting out of these particular animals. So they're trying to cover the essential, the amino acid structure and make it pretty similar. They're trying to do that. And they've been pseudo, acceptable so far. But they've got that covered for the most part. But still, there's still things that, that's one of the things from a nutritional standpoint. You saw that 21 grams of protein versus 19. To your point, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is apples to apples as far as amino acids. So they're trying to do that. They've got that in the back of their mind. But again, that's part of that science that we're going to have to come up with. Yes, sir.
Brad, a little different twist. We don't have gene editing going on in the gathering cell, a gene edited product.
This is where I get real biased. Gene editing. Can we actually take a gene out, or can we alter something? Can we do that? And we can do it for things like, for instance, for hide hair coat. We can make a black-colored particular breed. When you start talking about splicing, editing, and then I'm going to consume it, that's a whole different story, in my opinion. I rely on our Adenogen folks, our DNA company, on that particular topic. If you talk to them, it scares me to death. I would not want to have to try to sell it. And also, I think we talked about this some in your class yesterday. I don't know why I can't remember that. What is the kit? CRISPR. CRISPR is one of these technologies that you can actually use to alter, splice, insert a gene. And I was amazed whenever my folks at Adenogen, Brandon, told me that you can buy those now on Amazon for $121. You can buy a CRISPR kit, and you can actually insert a gene. I'm thinking about inserting one for hair growth. My luck, though, would be on the back of my hands. But the point is this group of MIT students got one of these CRISPRs off of Amazon earlier in the year, and within a 2-week period of time, they were able to construct a mosquito that was resistant to malaria. Oh, that's great. I'm nervous about the backside of that. I don't want to insert something that makes cattle not resistant to something. So the technology, again, it's different when you're talking about hair coat versus eating something, in my opinion. Good question. I've overlooked you 2 or 3 times.
My question is, since we're going to, we're planning on going to, a plant-based diet,
Mm-hmm.
and how we, and then, once you're, an elementary school kid, you talk about the food pyramid or the food chain.
Mm-hmm.
So, the first thing you talk about is, you think about plants being, fruits, vegetables, or grains.
Mm-hmm.
But, with me saying, plant-based diet, you think about, beans and nuts for, protein.
Mm-hmm.
But, dairy, that's still, but, it talks about, heme for, flavor and protein.
Right.
So I was, wondering, what is a fine definition for, protein and a fine definition for dairy for plant-based meals?
Mm-hmm. I had never have thought about it from that perspective. I've always thought about it from what is the definition of meat, and trying to virtually what is the definition of plant or cell-based meat. I've never looked at it that way. You bring up a good suggestion. I've always looked at it, what is the definition of meat, and trying to make sure that we have our ducks in a row from that to not allow some of these things to be called meat. I picked up a bag of potato chips on the United Airlines the other day. There were nacho chips, like Dorito chips. I forget the name of them. I got to looking at it, and they were called bacon something. And I got to reading on it, and it was vegan bacon. Well, that goes back to why the states are a little bit confused and concerned. I thought I was eating bacon-flavored potato chips, but I was actually eating something that had nothing to do with bacon. So there's a lot of confusion right now. I do think we're going to have to probably go back. I'm not a big fan of the food pyramid anyway. But if we do start having some of these things, right now they're not going to be in school lunch program because of price. So we'll eventually have to address what you're talking about. Got time for one more question, and I got to shut up. Whoops, 2.
I think I read an article a while back
Uh-huh. Still talking about the growth media? I know that normal cell culture from a medical standpoint we use, but I don't think so. I don't know. And Lord, if Dr. Odie doesn't know, he doesn't know? No. So I don't know on that, to be honest. Good question. One more. Yes, ma'am. Actually, I mean, God, that's one of those questions that, you know, those simple questions that are hard to answer. And that's a great question. I do discuss quite often, and I use John Butler, we talk about GMO corn all the time, and the differences in this and that, and how much is available and all of that. I don't think people understand much at all when it comes to food. One of the things that I do, when I took this job 4 years ago at PFG, I remember going into our CEO's office, and he kept calling me Dr. Morgan, Dr. Morgan. I said, you don't just call me Brad. He goes, no, we need some science in here, and we need it, to go out and you to train our sales force to be able to talk it. I said, okay. And he says, but don't turn this into a science fair. You know, we need to give them enough to where they can feel confident in asking questions or picking up the phone and trying to call. I think at this point, on the meat side of it, they're trying to hitch their wagon on the things we've talked about that makes you feel good. You saw the cardiologist? She says, I don't really want to eat this, but I ordered it, and I don't like the flavor of it that well. I guess I would order it, but I have more of a concern about the way the animals are treated and the greenhouse gases. They're hooking their things on those emotional type topics. Where the GMO thing, that is a completely different conversation, from a DNA standpoint. So it's probably two different conversations totally. I better shut up.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for the great questions from the audience as well. Our next speaker this morning is Dr.